I would just like to say a few words about the recent attack on the Asian American Pacific Islander community, specifically led by misogyny and white male privilege. A hate crime has been committed against Asian women who were murdered in Atlanta. These women were working their normal jobs in their nail salons specifically, and some were even clients. The AAPI community has been a heavy influence in my lifestyle and spirituality. Many of the great teachings I have carried with me in my life are taught by the Asian community. This culture has had such a large influence in American fashion, food, New Age beliefs, and many more. The AAPI community were targeted specifically as a hate crime as a direct result of white male privilege and ignorance. It continues to baffle me that the same people who were strongly influenced by Asian culture do not understand that the Asian community has faced nothing but hate for centuries. My experience in America has been that of racial discrimination, hate crimes targeted towards non-white people, and anyone who's a minority. I'm not American, Asian, or Pacific Islander, but I feel it is important that we support other communities, whether we are part of them or whether we do not share specific experiences. Though I know there are loving people in this world that respect the cultures and beliefs of people different from them, I also understand that there are still people that choose to live in fear and continuously act out hatefully. I want everyone to know that the Black community and myself extend our condolences and support to you all. I can't imagine how this must make you feel being a part of the AAPI community and simply being someone whose identity, race, religion, sexual preference, or physical attributes are continuously subject to hate crimes and harassment from ignorant people. That being said, I would like to ask anyone watching to please support these communities by listening to their voices and educating. Educating ourselves helps us to be better at understanding, though we may not agree, the differences in other human beings. It is never okay to justify your hate by any means, and I mean that. It is never okay to hurt somebody. The hate crimes that are actively targeting specific communities need to be taken more serious, and we all need to actively listen to, each other so that we can prevent things like this from continuously happening while our government and laws bypass the experiences of those being targeted. If you would like to support the AAPI community, there will be links below to resources as well as ways you can help combat racism and ignorance actively in your own lives. I will continue to stand with and support the AAPI community by educating myself and actively not tolerating the ignorance of others, and I hope you all will do the same. Please take a stand with me, the Black community, the AAPI community, and the LGBTQ+ community that all have been a major factor in who I am and in my life today. Take a stand with us by actively speaking up when something ignorant is said so that it prevents, things like this from happening. And just more than that, like if you feel that someone is honestly, truly not in a good mental state and that they are capable of doing harm or targeting specific communities, then please speak up and say something before it is too late. That being said, as I've said before on this channel, and even to some of my clients, I do not tolerate hate of any sorts. I'm not going to put up with it. I'm not even going to argue with anyone. You will definitely be reported. You will be banned from this channel, and I will make sure that actions are taken against you to, educate you on your ignorance, and so you can see how harmful it is to people in this world. Besides the point, I want to thank you all for listening to these short words, and I want to take a moment of silence. As we move forward in today's video, I want you all to really listen and try to apply what I'm trying to say about spiritual bypassing, especially if you are a religious or spiritual person, because not a lot of us realize this, but even people in the spiritual community are very subject to distributing and being a part of the hate that is going on in this world, and they simply use their spirituality or religion as a means to not confront that or admit to that. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is SundalaTarot. My name is Summer, and today we're going to be talking about spiritual bypassing and the harmful effects it has on self, on other, and what it presents like to the outside world and what it's like in our inner reality. So I wanted to talk about this for a multitude of reasons. One, because I feel like this is something that really affects the community today in regards to the active racism that's happening in the world, the tragic events where lives are constantly targeted based on their race, gender, or sexual orientation, and they are murdered for that specifically. And it is extremely unfortunate that though the spiritual community of all people should be the ones that should be open and supportive and ready to be there to help others, from my observation, it looks like there's been many people excusing the fact that they don't want to be involved in negativity as to not get involved or talk about these issues. So, I always usually put a warning, so I'm going to do that right now. If you feel like you cannot subjectively or objectively listen or intake new information that may threaten your old ways of belief, then your booty will in fact be tickled and this video ain't for you. Goodbye. If you feel as though your ego is bigger than the size of planet Earth, then once again, this video is not for you and your booty will be tickled. Goodbye. This will be the only and last time in this entire video that I will give a trigger warning, as I will not apologize ahead of time or afterwards for anyone feeling threatened or as though I have caused them to question their own ways of thinking or their own beliefs. That being said, your booty will be tickled and this video is not for you. If you feel that you can work on yourself and are open to new ideas or new ways of thinking, as I previously said, then please stay tuned and please listen with an open mind and an open heart. Okay, I did it. Cool. Basically, I'm not going to be apologizing anymore because I know that a lot of people will get offended no matter what, if that is the energy or the position or perspective that they put themselves in right off the bat. So I'm not apologizing for that. Let me just leave that at that. So if you get offended easily, or if you feel like your ego is very sensitive, then I'm going to go ahead and give you a formal goodbye. It was nice seeing you. It was nice knowing you. Thank you for the views. Now, as we continue forward, we're going to be going down a list. Basically, yes, I'm an organized queen, so I have to have a list so I can organize my thoughts and go about them thoroughly. And as we do that, I will be putting in some information that I received and that I've learned on my personal journey. How is spiritual bypassing harmful to self? A superiority complex that is created within the ego when we refuse to learn new information or when we are stuck in our old ways, which I will get to in just a second. But the main thing I want to touch on first is the avoidancy that comes with spiritual bypassing. Now, spiritual bypassing is deeper than just invalidating someone or invalidating yourself or the negative emotions that you experience in whatever situations that you're experiencing. The main thing that I wrote down was that it kind of creates this wall with anything that we would perceive as negative as humans, anything that is unpleasant. I will call these unpleasant experiences as we move forward. But with the emotions that come forward in ourselves when we have unpleasant experiences, obviously it is very stressful just experiencing that alone. So, that being said, spiritual bypassing and the avoidancy that comes with it, I'm just going to keep referring to it as like a wall or an ego barrier. Basically, people who think this way or who naturally spiritually bypass, they have this idea that everything negative equals bad or evil, or anything unpleasant equals bad or equals pain, okay? Yes, in a way, that is very much the truth. Obviously, unpleasant experiences are unpleasant. It doesn't get any deeper than that. It's simply an unpleasant experience. But these people feel as though because they're spiritual, they're only supposed to experience and be positive, okay? We'll get into the toxic positivity in just a second. But people who normally spiritually bypass have created this idea that for them to be the perfect human or for them to be a spiritual or religious human being and reach this period of enlightenment or reach the goal, the end goal, whatever it is in their journey, that they must only be accepting of, experiencing positive or accepting positive things. Now here is the flaw with that. When it comes to negative emotions or unpleasant experiences, in the spiritual practices, we commonly know these as lessons, okay? Everything's a lesson, whether it's positive or negative. There's no such thing as bad and good, but people with spiritual bypassing tendencies do not see things that way, as the teachings in most spiritual practices and most religions are. Instead, they see things as negative, which equals evil, which is satanic. Positive is positive, which equals good, which equals God. Which, if we're being realistic, not just in the Bible, but in other, spiritual and religious texts and historical texts as well, many great figures in history and in spiritual practices like deities, these deities and these historical people whom we look up to in their teachings and things they experience, many of the reason why they even accepted the negative things that are happening in their life, because they had to understand at some point that this is going to help them along their journey. Whenever we learn something from a negative experience, typically we apply it naturally to our active everyday life. For example, if I have a negative experience with burning my hand, I'm not just going to avoid anything that can burn my hand. I'm still going to cook every day, but I'm still going to understand that doing certain things can cause me to get my hand burned. But people who spiritually bypass or practice spiritual bypassing tendencies are completely avoidant of these things that could potentially hurt them or bring up unpleasant emotions. Now, obviously, that alone is a very flawed way of going about life for many reasons, but we're not here to dig into it too deep. I'm just here to let you know what spiritual bypassing does to self, okay? So, the next thing I wrote down was emotional stability. So, with spiritual bypassing and the idea that anything negative or unpleasant equals bad, and therefore I will not accept it, it kind of creates this habit of not exercising proper emotional stability in the psyche. What does that mean? Well, as we go about life, let's say I have a certain thing that makes me angry, and I kind of have to work through that anger so that the next time this thing happens, I'm not overtaken by this emotion. My emotional control is stable. Okay, I'm able to practice certain exercises or speak to myself in a certain way, so I know better than to just react on that emotion. People who spiritually bypass are very challenged in that aspect. So because people who are spiritual bypassers are challenged in that aspect, and they have created this ego wall of perfectionism around them, where if it's not pleasant, then it equals not good, or it equals evil, or negativity, should I say, which isn't always the case. The world is not as simple as black and white, and we know that. But they have already, completely created this bubble around them. Okay, so let's move forward. Now, what happens when that bubble is created around them? Well, anytime anything unpleasant that they cannot control in their life happens, they see it as the end-all, be-all, okay? So they take things to the extremes. If it's not completely pleasant, or if it's not ordinary, then, it's completely bad. It's a horrible experience. I don't want to be here anymore. And they have a really hard time coping with that and the experience. Therefore, they have a hard time seeing what went wrong and, whether something was out of their control or not. So people with this complex of, I'm just going to keep saying it, bypassing anything that they need to work through, here's the big issue with that in their everyday lives. Like I said, because they're unable to properly stabilize their emotions, because they never face any challenges or anything that may cause them to question their beliefs or this current idea that they've built around themselves, which is the bubble that we are talking about. It makes it really hard for them to learn from imperfection and accept imperfection as being helpful or being something to learn from. We are not ever going to be perfect. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. And if it was, then what is the point of us being on this earth? What is the point of existence? But these people just see things as, I'm just going to say, like utopia. Their view of the world is, if it's not utopia, then it's not worth living. But as a spiritual person, I personally know that everything must have a balance, that there is bad and good, and there is good and bad. Because these people have built this bubble around themselves that, there's only extremes, okay? There's only extremes in these people's eyes. Let's say that there's a world event that happens where, like recently, a group of specific racial background was targeted and murdered in cold blood, and because of simple ignorance and hate, they simply will not partake in it. they will say phrases like sending love and light instead of getting involved and learning and educating themselves to, be a part of preventing this from happening in the future. They will just simply band-aid things, which I will also get into in a second. But besides this band-aiding, how does it affect them psychologically is what I really wanted to know, what I really wanted to dig into, specifically in regards to bypassing people, not just spiritually, but how does it affect them with themselves and spiritually. So, upon doing a little digging, which I will leave a few links for where I got my research from and the sources or whatever, upon doing some digging, I found that it is very common for people who spiritually bypass to have really poor emotional management. So, as we were talking about, these people have a really hard time accepting what is and learning from it to prevent things from happening next time, excuse me. And if they can't, be in control of that, then they are completely incapable of controlling their emotions that arise within situations in the future that they cannot control, or that they don't completely have a say in, or have, can control the image of, should I say. So I'm going to use another example. Let's say there's a group on Facebook discussing, I'm just going to use racism a lot today, but discussing racism and how there's a lot of things that we need to educate ourselves on to prevent it in the future. Now, let's say that this Facebook community was specifically made for those who are spiritual to talk about worldly things that can help us move forward in our spiritual involvements or spiritual lessons. But let's say there's a bypasser on that page, and in this discussion of why racism helps humanity to grow whenever we actually listen to other people to avoid it, and to avoid ignorance, and educate people to avoid being ignorant. And I say avoid in a good light, not in a bad way, but I guess instead of avoid, I guess grow from ignorance, or remove this thing that is hindering society from going forward with one another. Let's say that the reason why this person made this post is because they really want to help people achieve oneness with other, okay, which is another huge lesson in spirituality and in most religions, is being connected to other, and servitude, and not being selfish, being selfless, and helping others to also achieve and grow things in their personal life. But because the spiritual bypasser is on this Facebook group and they see this, they instantly feel threatened because, like I said, a lot of spiritual bypassers have this idea of toxic positivity, and they create this perfection bubble around them that if anything threatens it, or if anything's negative or brings up emotions that are strong or something they don't want to work through, then they will backlash and take it out on others instead of confronting it within themselves. So you'll probably see this in with love. Let's say, for an example, they leave a comment and they're like, with love and light, this is not something we should be focusing on. There's a bigger picture out there. But it's like, this is part of the bigger picture. This is something we need to combat together to move forward, to let everyone can progress in community. This isn't just about us. But another thing I wanted to get into is the reason why it is really hard for people who spiritually bypass to empathize, is because they have also created this superiority complex by thinking that they are these perfect beings, that because they only believe in love and light, that they are the end-all be-all of people. We'll move on to the next segment, which is other, and how spiritual bypassing affects other people. I want to go ahead and just conclude this by saying that a main thing that we can recognize in people who commonly exude this kind of energy, or that we see, I think they're also, I think there's always something deeper going on within themselves, which is the reason why they act this way, is what I'm trying to get at. Many people who spiritually bypass are doing this because they are projecting, not wanting to confront their fears onto others, okay? Another thing that we commonly see in spiritual bypassing is people who are comfortable, specifically people who do shadow work and like go within. They get the psychological help they need. They get therapy. They work through the darker emotions so that they can grow as a human being and move forward. These people will be scrutinized by spiritual bypassers because, like I said, they believe in perfect and only positive. But the biggest flaw in this is that if you really, if you're on a spiritual path to help yourself grow, a part of working with self and helping self grow is understanding the world around you. You cannot grow if you don't know how to grow within the world around you, or how the world around you functions, or what's going on in the world that needs to be healed, okay? I'm not saying everyone on this earth is a fucking healer, because no, that's not the case, okay? Not everyone is put on this earth to be a nurse. Not everyone is put on this earth to be a spiritual healer or to be on a spiritual path at all. But bypassing in general is really, really unhealthy towards self, because it's very invalidating towards your own emotions. It's invalidating your experiences that you have gone through by saying like, oh no, that didn't happen at all. I don't even want to talk about that. Ew. But it's like, there's always something that we can take away from something, no matter how bad it was. And I'm not saying that as a way to invalidate other people's, experiences, but it is true that we can really learn how to help. Sometimes a negative experience doesn't always mean like we have this huge magical fucking lesson that we take out of it. Sometimes we just go through that, and that all we can take out of it is that I don't want this to happen to someone else. And that alone is powerful, because that experience that you have with something that was horrible can help prevent it from happening to someone else, or can help someone else cope through it in healthier ways than you experienced. So this is why I say that spiritual bypassers have this very superiority complex, because they don't even believe in helping others unless it's something positive, or unless it's something that's beneficial in a positive light, okay? And it's very frustrating to see, okay? But I'm not here to rant and rave. We're going to go ahead and move on with spiritual bypassing and how it affects others. So we already almost got into like some of the things that you can recognize on the outside looking in, that's going on in someone's head or in someone's, inner world when they are spiritually bypassing other people, or when they are spiritually bypassing themselves by actively not wanting to see life completely, like seeing the full circle. They only want to see half of the pie, basically, is the whole thing with spiritual bypassing. Is if it's not positive, then it's completely bad and it's harmful to yourself, which is not the fucking case. Not it, sis, okay? There's a lot to learn from negative experiences, like I previously said. But that being said, negative things that happen to others around them, they will usually have a hard time empathizing with or being there to support in proper ways. So, like I said, an outside thing that we can see this happening with is, them saying that they're sending you this energy, that they're sending you the support, but not actively being there. Now, the reason why I wanted to touch on avoidancy when it comes to self is because whatever is going on in your inner world, it directly reflects what's going to be happening on the outside, because how you act towards yourself is going to directly be reflected to how you treat people, because that's just all you know so far. If all I know is negative self-talk, then of course I'm going to constantly negatively talking to other people. Now, see how that comes full circle? Basically, what I wrote down in my notes, because I don't want to get too deep into it, with this one specifically, is people who spiritually bypass will use their religion or spiritual beliefs to justify avoiding situations that are calling them to action, or that require them to actively participate as a human being or in a community. When I say that, I am going to refer to racism again. I see this often a lot on social media, where something will happen and someone from the spiritual community will talk about it and then get backlash. And in this person in the spiritual community talking about this, they're not doing it to, be stuck and stagnant in the emotion of grievances or anger. They're doing it to help others work through those feelings. We have to always confront things if we want to work through them, okay? That especially requires acknowledgement. And when people who are spiritually bypassing don't acknowledge things, they're not even able to work through emotions or work through the things that they need to by acknowledging them. Just like there's a saying, you have to face your fears if you want to combat them, okay? I don't know who said that, but I just hear that a lot. If I find who said it specifically, I'll resource it. But anyways, I put something specific for an example. So this is something you might hear someone spiritually bypassing in this specific situation of racism say. So someone who is bypassing might say something like, racism is a heavy negative situation, and I only choose love and light, therefore I will not talk about this or bring this into my... And as I said, this goes back to the whole acknowledgement thing. People who are spiritually bypassers refuse to acknowledge anything that they perceive as negative or anything negative that they do not want to affect them in their personal life. Now, here's the thing about humanity. Whatever is going on in the world is going to indirectly affect us some way, shape, or form. Let's say that we have someone who has a lot of power that is encouraging misogyny, that is encouraging abuse towards women. Therefore, it is normalized, and therefore it makes it harder to prevent further abuse or sexualization of women. Just like what happened in the Atlanta shooting, which, once again, my condolences to those who were affected by this and who, just feel unsafe, because I understand that feeling. But this is what I'm talking about. People who spiritually bypass can't see that. They can't see that just because it's not affecting you directly, you're still involved, okay? But that's the thing with them. They don't even confront things within themselves, so how are they supposed to confront things in their outer world, okay? So I did put an example of something that you would normally see with someone who is, authentically on a spiritual or religious path of helping others or being there for humanity. I put racism brings up heavy emotions and makes me uncomfortable, but I understand that this experience is meant to help us grow and meant to help us move forward so that we can all be treated as human beings, okay? So instead of not acknowledging it completely, instead of saying, you know what, this isn't my reality, I don't accept it, it's like, whether you accept it or not, it's still here, okay? I hate to break it to you, but just because you don't want the sky to be blue doesn't mean it's going to turn purple. Now, that would be great, but sorry. So, it gets a little deeper, all right? So just bear with me, okay? If you need to take a break, if your brain's hurting, then pause this, go take a break, get some water, okay? Now, I know some of you may be thinking, okay, it's kind of obvious, how spiritual bypassing can really affect society and how it can really contribute to ignorance and avoidancy in society when it comes to talking about topics just because they are uncomfortable or because we specifically don't understand them or haven't been through that experience. Now, here's how that kind of goes into a little bit further. So things get a little bit more, I'm going to say toxic here, because when it comes to acknowledging things and, being able to be there for others, though you don't experience that specifically, people who spiritually bypass will normally excuse unhealthy treatment or behavior towards other people by saying like, oh, well, I didn't want to get involved in negativity, it was draining for me, blah, blah, blah. Which, okay, that's fine. But, your friend wants to vent to you about how they feel. I'm not saying that everyone always has to be there for people. I get it, okay? Sometimes it is truly hard to show up, especially when things are heated or when things are so fresh, okay? But the issue in general is that people who spiritually bypass will often never take ownership or never take responsibility or accountability for their actions, which contribute to the ignorance or to the harmful things happening in society and to other people. That is what I was trying to get at. Now, when it comes to that, you'll often see that in friendships, these people will show up as those who kind of brush off your emotions or brush off how you're feeling or your experiences just because you don't understand them. Now, they definitely do this to other people who are not their friends, especially when it comes to online. They feel like it's free reign. But people who spiritually bypass also have a really hard time taking accountability when they contribute to something that they're avoidant of being negative. See how things always come full circle? Now, because for them, things don't come full circle, and therefore they don't acknowledge anything negative, they're not even capable of saying like, oh, okay, I fucked up, or oh, okay, that was inappropriate, I shouldn't have talked about that, or I shouldn't have said that specifically, I didn't know that that was microaggression towards Black people, like they're not even capable of confronting that with themselves because they don't, it's just crazy, they don't confront it, that's happening around them, so why would they be able to even understand that they did something wrong? Which in a way, when you act that way, when you are avoidant in general, it makes it really hard for you to take any accountability. So that's kind of understandable, but it becomes an issue because it's this habit and this pattern that you're creating with the obsessiveness of never, completely turning a blind eye to anything that threatens you or turning a blind eye to anything that you just don't want to deal with because you just don't. Now, the main thing that really frustrates me about spiritual bypassers and how they try to find a loophole within their own flaw of thinking that everything's positive and that everything's all good and dandy as long as they pretend it's not there, is that when it comes to servitude on a spiritual path, and even if you're not specifically on a path of serving humanity or contributing to it, in some way, shape, or form, you are contributing to it, whether you think so or not. Whether it's just the way that you act or the way that you treat other people, you are definitely contributing to it because you are influencing the outside world in that aspect. But people who are this way, they will try to find the loophole. They don't want to be seen as like narcissistic. Oh, for Lord forgive them if they think that they are even, slightly flawed, whether it's psychologically, whether they have mental illness. They don't even want to accept that. But it's an issue because when it comes to them still wanting to be a service to others, they will do the absolute bare minimum. And I mean like the bottom of the barrel. They will do something like, okay, just going to use another example. Let's say their friend recently had a family member that passed away, but they also experienced this, so that's why their friend came to them thinking that, oh, okay, well, they can relate to me. But because they never worked through the trauma of losing a parent at such a young age, they just don't even understand that. So they have really unhealthy ways of coping. So when this friend comes to them for advice as to how to get through this, or just for support or an ear so they can talk about how they feel, this person will say something like, actually, I don't want to talk about that. I'm not comfortable with talking like that. Valid. But it gets really bad because then they will say, I will not talk about that, but I'll send you love and light, okay? I'll send you loving energy. I'll still be here for you, but I won't show up, is basically what it is for them. So they'll be there for you energetically, but even then, not even the case, and they just won't show up, okay? Now, when we get to the, reality, the practical aspect of what's actually going on in the outside and inner world of people who do this, I specifically wrote down that they act this way as a means to, once again, avoidancy, I'm going to keep saying that, but as a means to disguise real issues going on within themselves because they don't ever want to see themselves or perceive the world around them as being imperfect or being negative in any sort of way that they have to deal with because of this avoidancy. Now, I put an example. This is why I said someone's going to get booty tickled. But I said having psychic powers when in reality it's just paranoia or it's hypervigilancy or other mental disability that you may not want to, say that it is or get therapeutic help for or psychological help for to actually, see what's going on within yourself. Another example I'm going to use is so a lot of people in the spiritual community who meditate and that have had out-of-body experiences know what it's like to have those experiences or to astrally leave your body. But sometimes people who spiritually bypass, who know that there's some underlying thing going on deeper than that, they might have, let's say, a dissociative disorder where if anything makes them feel like they're going to be put in a dangerous situation like they have been in the past, then they're going to mistake this out-of-body experience when it's actually them just dissociating, which is similar to an out-of-body experience in the way that you almost detach from your physical form and you feel like you're not present. But dissociation has its own, symptoms and things that people go through to cope with that in healthy ways. But because you're spiritually bypassing, you're invalidating yourself, so you don't even know that something is underlying or going on. So the issue that comes with not ever acknowledging anything or being avoidant, just in reality and in the practical world, spirituality and religion aside, it can be a really bad issue when it comes to even discovering or trying to figure out if there's something going on within yourself, okay? So you might mistake it, as a spiritual bypasser, mistake depression for being like, oh, someone's sending me negative emotions or someone's cursing me. But in reality, there's a chemical imbalance going on in your brain, which is causing you to feel this way, which is causing you to feel, like you're in a really dark spot. And instead of getting psychological help or getting professional help, they don't want to be perceived as negative, which that's not the case for every spiritual bypasser, but I just find that as a very common thing that they do, where they just are really concerned with how they're being perceived and the perception of their outside world. Now, I said this previously regarding the band-aiding, which I said I was going to go back to. We're getting back to it. When it comes to relationships with people who are this way, definitely when you're in a relationship, whether it's a friendship, they're your mother, they're your sister, brother, whoever, you're related to them, or whatever in some sorts, you often find that they will band-aid your problems, or they will band-aid problems in their life as to not deal with it, okay, as to not have to process it and not go through it. They don't want to deal with it. It's negative. I'm not a negative person. I'm a good person. I'm all love and light here, so I can't, I can't have that in my group. I can't have that in my circle. It's how these people are. So that's a huge issue with spiritual bypassing, is the band-aiding, which you often see in the comment sections on social media, like sending love and light or sending my support, but they're not actively showing up. They're not actively trying to help you or provide resources so you can get help yourself. Excuse the lighting, y'all. It's very dreary outside, so I'm having to like flip up the light, turn it down, just so I don't look like a white ghost. So anyways, we're going to move forward. Now, something that I put in as a personal note from my personal experience, I said that spiritual bypassing often feels like narcissism, blatantly, and I'm just going to flat out say that. It often feels like narcissism, because with narcissists, they just lack this ability to empathize with other people. They just don't care whether it's something going on in their brain or whether it's something that was taught to them. They just simply do not care. If it does not affect them personally, or if it's not going to drastically change their lives in any way, shape, or form, then, unless it's going to benefit them, of course. Like I said, the whole positive thing, only acknowledging things when it's positive, that's kind of the feel that it has. So I said energetically, it feels like narcissism. Now, piggybacking off of what I said with the whole narcissism thing, and I mentioned the superiority complex earlier as well, this is the biggest issue with the whole bypassing in general. So definitely there's like this superiority complex when it comes to like the spiritual the spiritual community or the religious community. You especially see this in people who have a large following, which I'm not even going to get too deep into because yikes, that's a whole other mess in itself. But people have a large following or a large audience, or they know a lot of people will listen to them. They kind of create this complex with their ego where they feel as though, everyone else is human beings and their negative emotions are basically equivalent to the peasant type, okay? Everyone else is peasants, and because I'm godlike and I exude this positive God energy constantly, because I don't focus on the negatives, everyone should be coming to me for answers. I'm the one that everyone should be relying on, and they need me to grow. Literally close my blinds because I was looking crazy, okay? I don't like the way the lighting was looking. So going back to what I was saying, basically, it prevents itself where if anything challenges, this idea that they've created with themselves, or this pedestal they put with themselves on, they will tear it down. They will try their best to say like, oh, everyone's coming at me with this negative energy. They will play this victim role when it comes to that, especially when they have a social following or when they have a social outlet where they speak their whatever their bullshit that they spew. They will often be quick to tear other people down or to shoot people down instead of actually really comprehending and thinking on, this challenges me, but it challenges me for a reason. So let me figure out why, and let me figure out what I'm trying to learn from this, and what, instinctually I'm being told I need to learn from this challenge. They will not see it that way, okay? Like I said, the whole superiority, the whole complex that they've created with themselves has convinced them that they can do no harm, they can do no evil, whether it's physically. There are even cases where people in the spiritual community who have power, or who have voices, or a large outlet, have in fact had accusations of abuse come out against them, or where they have done something that, was very harmful to other people in some way, shape, or form, whether it's lessons they're teaching other people that are, a load of shit, or whatever. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but like I said, it prevents itself as like them thinking they're God, okay? I'm going to say like the Kanye West energy. It's giving me the Kanye vibes, where no one can be like me. Like, y'all should be worshiping me. I'm a God. I'm positive. I'm glowing. I'm always vibrating high because I don't focus on negative things, or I don't acknowledge or talk about them. Therefore, everyone needs to come to me, like I said, like as if we need them in this world to be acting like that. Now, last but not motherfucking least, this is a personal thing that I've experienced, is I mean, specifically, we're almost done talking about the outward and what it looks like to the outside world and how these people act. I said that they are very nitpicky with the information, okay? I don't know if it's just me that I've experienced this, but when there's something that comes out, when it's like an advancement in spiritual teachings, or when something goes against their, like I said, something challenges them in some way, shape, or form, and they feel threatened by it, they will nitpick the information to kind of like fit their agenda or fit their ideals that they have about themselves or the world. I'll just use an example. Let's say someone goes to church and they, are advocates for a lot of the teachings in the Bibles and they stand by it, but there's a teaching that kind of challenges the way that they act in their reality or in real life. Therefore, they nitpick this teaching apart to fit into it so they don't seem, lesser. Now, I'm not here to read anyone to filth today, okay? I'm just here to psychologically evaluate and point out things to help us, all together grow, okay? Because these things can also help me to not invalidate you guys in the future and to not invalidate myself as well. If I ever come across something that's, I may not want to deal with, okay? God forbid that's the case, because I'd rather just confront things head on. But I see this a lot in the Christian and Catholic communities where they will nitpick information from the Bible, or they will specifically, overlook specific teachings in the Bible because it threatens the way that they have created, how the world should be, or threatens their idea of what Christianity or Catholicism should look like in the outward world. That being said, we're going to move forward. This is so complicated. So like I'm constantly messed with my hair in videos. It's because it just like it does whatever it wants. No matter how I style it, no matter how I pin it, it just like falls everywhere, whatever. Anyways, moving on to the next topic, how to balance spirituality and practicality, or how to, be spiritual and still be in reality or be connected to reality. Now, there's not many notes that I have on this one because I think I wanted to very much simplify it and put it in very simple terms as to not overcomplicate things, because when we're trying to stay connected to reality as human beings, it is fucking hard. It's hard because Earth is fucking ghetto. Earth is ghetto. I'm just joking, but it is hard, okay? It's hard being a human being. It's hard having the human experience because there's so many things that contribute to what your experience is, like your race, your gender, things that all in turn don't really matter, but still are a huge factor in things that you experience every day. Being a Black, bisexual, mixed woman, part of multiple communities, supporting multiple communities, and also sometimes dressing non-binary. So yes, some days I look like I'm finna tear somebody's ass up. Human experiences that I've had in that aspect have been very challenging on my mental state, my emotional state, and sometimes even my physical state, because there were days where I just did not want to fucking leave the house and deal with people's, racist ass ignorant comments towards me, especially if I was with my, I always talk about this, but like a lighter skinned sister, or if I was hanging out with someone who is part of my family, like my mom, for example, and looks just like me. Well, I look just like her. People really, I don't know what encourages people to say ignorant things. Obviously, ignorance is ignorance, but it's beyond me sometimes. So I understand why people sometimes become avoidant of certain situations and become very avoidant in confronting certain things, because it can bring up a lot of things that are heavy. So definitely, that's why I talk about getting professional help when you can. Now, the point that I'm trying to make in general with, understanding that people become avoidant sometimes, is that, like I said, I get it, okay? Because at some point, I wouldn't know this stuff as deep as I do if I didn't act that way at some point in my life. And it's a little bit upsetting for me to say that I did act like that, but I'm fucking glad that I don't think that way anymore. I used to honestly think that spirituality was all about seeing the positive in life, which in a way it is, but spirituality really requires you to do some inner work and really requires you to confront some things that you usually don't want to normally deal with, or that you usually don't have the capacity to deal with, okay? Especially on your own. Sometimes spirituality isn't always, praying isn't always, meditating, sometimes spirituality is getting professional help for yourself or getting the help that you need when you need it. And this is why I talk a lot about why it's important to balance reality with spirituality or practicality with spirituality in that way, so that you don't fall into the habit of being avoidant, therefore bypassing yourself and then bypassing others, because that's how it works, like I was talking about. And I repeat it so many times. So I'm just going to jump into it, into the notes that I wrote. I wrote quite a few, but like I said, very simple things, okay? Most of this is just things that I wanted to touch on in relation to the spiritual bypassing. But I said that being spiritual means that you are... being spiritual means that you are currently having a human experience and you're experiencing human things, okay? So I'm going to leave that at that before we move forward. That being said, when we when we really think about being human beings, you have to understand that in spiritual thinking, or in most practices and religious practices, we are spirits inside human bodies, okay? We are energy inside human bodies. So that being said, when you hear us say like we are human beings, I mean we are spirits having a human being experience, or that we are spiritual beings having a human being experience, that is what we are referring to. But I just had to clarify that because I know not everyone understands that saying. I also said that our human experiences are meant for us to expand on our spirituality, and vice versa. Our spirituality is meant for us to use it as a tool to expand ourselves as human beings. So that's kind of the importance of the balance of, I'm a human being, so I still need to handle human shit. But because I'm a spiritual being, I also need to cater to myself, recharge spiritually by, doing my practices, which makes me feel good about myself, or doing something that helps me feel connected to God's source or God energy, or makes me feel connected to my guides, okay? Whatever you are connecting to, it's very important to balance that practice out with reality, okay? Like getting some sun, going outside for a walk. It doesn't have to be constantly, but every now and then, just like staying grounded is extremely important with spirituality or religious practices. That way you don't become obsessive and lose touch with reality, and therefore your life is passing you by. You're losing all these people in your life. Your friends don't want to be around you anymore because you're freaking them the fuck out, Not saying that it's freaky for people to not understand your spirituality, which I guess sometimes it is, but it can be fucking terrifying when you're watching your friend's life fall apart because they don't believe in money, okay? They don't believe in material things, therefore they won't pay their bills. But they have a house and they have responsibilities as an adult, but they don't do it because they simply just don't believe in that reality. Now, here's the thing. You don't have to believe in money. You don't have to believe in the systems that were created to keep us oppressed and to keep us stuck in certain mindsets and certain stress levels. But we're in reality, so you're going to have to participate in some way, shape, or form to be able to provide to yourself, and if you have kids or whoever else is around you, provide for them as well. You still have to take care of your vessel. You still have to take care of yourself. You still have to have a life for yourself, okay? You can't just be all spiritual and that's it. Now, unless you're going to dedicate yourself like a nun or a Buddhist monk, then, I'm all fucking for it. Go do your thing. But at the end of the day, they still also have to eat. They're still in their human vessels, so they still have to take care of it. They still need a roof over their head from the elements. They still need shelter from the elements. They still need sometimes clothing on their bodies so they don't freeze to death. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's very important to balance it in that way, okay? And I know it sounds really like fabricated that I'm saying that people honestly don't do this, but they don't. Okay, some people honestly let their lives slip by them because they're so deep in their spirituality, which is nothing wrong with that, but you still need to be in touch with reality. Like, how are you supposed to apply what you're learning spiritually if you're not even here on planet Earth? Okay? That's what I'm trying to get at. That's what I'm trying to come full circle with. Like, you still need to be present, even if you don't like what's going on here, because you're still needed. You're a necessity right now to society, and you are very essential to the growth of humanity and where we're headed to next, and the next few centuries, or whatever else happens on. maintaining balance in your life is always going to somewhat feel like a compromise, which in a way it is, okay? But that's still important, okay? That's very important to learning to respect other people's boundaries and learning what your boundaries are, is by learning how to balance everything. Just going to use myself as an example. Like, I can't completely dedicate my time to my spirituality, and I can't, you know, as much as I love being with myself and sitting with myself and pampering myself, whether it's with some intellectual knowledge or just, you know, really understanding who I am as a person by exploring myself, I still have relationships with people to maintain. I can't just completely abandon, you know, the people around me. I can't just completely disconnect from the people around me because it makes me uncomfortable sometimes to be present. Sometimes I need to show up because even then there's lessons for me to learn from other people around me. And even then there's also lessons for me to learn by myself. So the balance is essential in that aspect, but I want to get a little bit deeper into it. All right, now this is where we get into, you know, a little bit of the tips that I have for myself on how I was able to do this, and for others this may be helpful in applying this to your own lives, but how to balance spirituality with practicality or with reality in general. I said the only time that you should compromise, you know, a way of thinking or an experience, you know, a perspective you had an experience or anything of that sort, the only time you should compromise that is when you feel like whatever you went through has served its purpose. All right, let's say that you went through a breakup with someone and this breakup was really bad and you kind of had to take a few, you know, you had to take some time off for yourself from the dating field. But you can't, I mean, if you still want love, but you can't not be present in the dating field after that, you know, healing process has served its purpose, and therefore it's time to move forward. It's a stagnancy that, you know, you can really tell when there's a need for balancing your life is when something feels stagnant, especially when it comes to spirituality and the practical world. Stagnancy usually presents itself in the way like, you know, you being in your hermit mode for your healing process, but it's been like 3 years and you never actively are present in the people around you in their life, or you're never active in the world around you, or you're never active in nature anymore like you used to be. You're just kind of, you got comfortable with being in the hermit mode, so you don't want to get out there. But it's very important and essential that you do get out there, because what you learned while you were in your hermit mode is necessary for you to go out and apply it to life so that you can move forward to where you're supposed to be in life and become the person you're meant to be, okay? Like, you're always the person you're meant to be, but get to the point of your goal, or get to where your, you know, your life purpose is leading you. So to really know how to balance these things, you have to understand that attachments aren't completely bad, but also being completely detached can be unhealthy. There has to be balance, okay? You can still be attached to experiences that happen to you because you're allowed to, okay? When something has caused something so significant to change your life, it's okay to revisit it sometimes, but it becomes an issue when you're constantly revisiting it or you're constantly reliving it instead of moving forward in your life, okay? But it's okay if you're revisiting it to apply it to something that you're going through currently. That's completely different, all right? Another thing that I said is that, you know, you have to be comfortable with releasing things as well. You have to learn to be comfortable with detaching from things, all right? Especially after they have served their purpose, all right? So let's say there's a friend in your life that they came around to teach you how to have fun. They came around to teach you how to let the fuck loose because you're an uptight ass. At some point in our lives, things, I mean, I don't want to say that. Oh my God. That was the most adult thing that I've ever said, and it's disgusting. Like, ew. Somebody cancel me because I can't believe I just said that. But it's true. At some point in our lives, like, you kind of have to get real and think about, like, what do I want? Like, do I want to do something super crazy like everyone else wants me to do, or do I want to do something else that makes me happy? All right? You have to really question things in life to find where you belong, because at the end of the day, we all belong somewhere. I don't believe that there are people that just don't belong anywhere and they're just floating around. I just simply don't think that. I think that we all serve a purpose in this world, whether it's for, you know, quote unquote good or bad. We all serve some significant purpose. So in order to really, I guess what I'm trying to get at with the analogy with a friend is that after you have fun at some point in life, you know, you learn to have fun, and this person has taught you how to do that. The lesson is, you have learned how to enjoy yourself, but also return back to work. But at some point in time, there will be people that come along to teach us lessons that just are meant to teach us lessons, and that's it. Sometimes they're not meant to be lifelong people, which is unfortunate. That doesn't mean you can't keep in touch with them. They can still be present in your life in some way, shape, or form, but it's like this balance with releasing and attachment, like I said. Like, at some point, you have to release people, you have to release things, you have to release old ways of thinking, you have to release emotional comfortability, like being comfortable in negative emotions all the time, or being too comfortable with the positive emotions, quote unquote, because what's a negative and positive? But to balance those things, you really have to understand the balance between attachment and releasing attachment, which we'll kind of get into in a little bit, because everything kind of somewhat comes full circle, as I always do with my point. Now, something that is extremely essential when it comes to balancing practical life and spiritual life is not clinging onto labels, not clinging onto experiences, emotions, or anything of that sort, okay? Just labeling things is really going to overcomplicate your life in that way, okay? It kind of reminds me of like when you were exploring your sexuality as, you know, whatever age you were when you did that, and like you kind of were very confused because there's all these worldly labels, like, oh, if you do this, then you're this, but it's like, but I'm not that, okay? Like, yes, I do those things, but I don't do all the rest of that. Like, that's not me. So that's what I mean. Like, labeling things will overcomplicate things, and it can really cause you to be overly attached into the material plane or in the spiritual plane. So learn to be comfortable with not having labels. And I'm not trying to push some agenda. A label sees fit to something in your life, then okay, apply it where it is necessary. But when something, you know, when there's labels going around and what you're experiencing and it just doesn't make sense or it doesn't feel right, then don't attach onto it, okay? Just let it be what it is, okay, is what I'm trying to get at. That's a very, very important spiritual lesson I had to learn, is letting things be as they are, okay? Or as they are not. So if something, like, for example, I'll use my sexuality label. Bisexuality is a label that I use because that just sees fit to what specifically I'm normally going through when it comes to attractiveness to other people. That doesn't mean that I can't be attractive to anyone that's not specifically, you know, binary woman or binary man. You know, I can still be attached to someone transitioning, but it just sees fit, you know, that I am bisexual. To me, that I don't overly attach that label, even though I apply it to my life, because that just feels right to me. But like I said, I naturally don't attach onto any labels, okay, in that aspect. That doesn't mean that you don't have to, okay? If you know what you like, then you know what you like, end of story. But don't overcomplicate any situation or emotion that you're going through by labeling it, okay? Because logic is never going to specifically apply to emotions. You cannot apply logic to emotions because emotions are not logical things, is what I'm trying to get at. So if you're going through a plethora of different emotions, you're angry, happy, you're excited, but you can't find the specific label for all of those fit, then just don't, okay? Go through it and leave it be, okay? Let it flow, okay? Flow, let it flow. And that would be like the biggest thing in helping you to balance practicality and spiritual practices in your everyday life, is to let things. Guys, we're coming to an end. Hang in there. Hang in there. We're almost done. So this one is also just simple. I worded it very long, but I'm just going to say it short. A huge thing in helping you to balance yourself in these aspects is to listen to your feelings and to your hunches. So this is also very important when it comes to knowing when to release something or knowing when to accept something, especially if it's like an attachment of some sort, okay? Not all attachments are bad. Another example, because I love using examples, I'm the example queen. Let's say that, I'm not feeling a certain job situation anymore, okay? It's just not resonating with me, and it's just not in alignment with who I am anymore, though it used to be, though it served its purpose in teaching me certain things that I can apply into whatever else I move into. I'm going to release that if I'm able to. Said, if something needs to be released in general, weird example, because I know not everyone could just fucking up and leave their jobs. I get not everyone's in the situation to do that, but you get what I'm saying. if something doesn't resonate with you anymore, then learn to release it and not be attached onto it, even if there's still that nostalgia of the experience that you went through with it, okay? Sometimes you just really need to release things after they serve their purpose so the next thing can come in for you, so the next thing can happen in your life, or so that you're open to the next thing you're open to the next thing happening in your life. Now, before I move on to concluding this whole segment, I said the main thing for me with balancing things is to know when you're repressing feelings and experiences, and understand that accepting negativity doesn't mean that you are I cannot find the word for it, but accepting negativity does not mean that you are saying that what happened in your experience or what happened when those emotions came up was okay. Okay, you're not justifying it, you're not advocating for it. You're just saying that I'm accepting it so that I can release this and move on from it. So I can work through it and learn from it if I need to, or just work through it so I can help someone else with it. And that's that. So I said the reason why I said repressing feelings is because I think repressing feelings is the biggest thing that'll, no matter what aspect in life, it'll honestly cause you to just fall off kilter with yourself. You will be unbalanced in general, whether it's with your mental state, your emotional state, your physical state. Doing too much of anything or repressing anything that's going on is always not going to be healthy for you, right? Now, I get it. Sometimes it's not easy for you to confront things in that moment, but when the time comes, you need to be open to doing so. And I get it. I'm talking about these things like it's just easy peasy lemon squeezy. And it's not. It's hard, lemon hard. Like, this isn't something that you can just go through and okay, done. Like, it's not, it's not apples and oranges, okay? It's hard for everyone in its own way. It's easier for some people with specific things to get through. Like, some people, it's easier for them to attach onto things, and some people, it's easier for them to release things. So either way, there's always going to be some challenge in that aspect of balancing yourself with spirituality and practicality, especially when it comes to your spiritual beliefs, because you're not, not everyone in the world is going to think like you. So when you're trying to have a boundary in that way spiritually, so that you're not drained from somebody, it's kind of hard to get them to understand that. But you still need to have, you still need to be able to release when something just isn't working for you. But so, like, people think like a lot of things that I'm going to be talking about are just like applied for spirituality, but no, like, I'm not just talking about this for that. Like, a lot of the things that I'm talking about can practically help us, especially in a psychological matter, because repression and the things that I was talking about, like avoidancy, just those type of things really can affect us psychologically and can affect how our body functions and how we're able to utilize our body and how we're able to utilize knowledge or retain new knowledge. Okay, so I want everyone to be open and receiving these messages, which I understand. Like I said, I have a trigger warning for a reason. I know not everyone is open, period. So if you're still watching and you feel very challenged, then ask yourself why. Because I'm not here to hurt your feelings. I'm not here to attack you and make you feel bad about yourself. Like I said, I've been through these things. That's why I'm trying to help you go through it. All right, guys, we made it to the very end. So here's the conclusion. So all in all, how is spiritual bypassing unhealthy, both on a psychological level, on a practical level, in every aspect in your life in general? How is bypassing in general unhealthy, and how can I, as a person, make sure that I'm not bypassing or that I'm not practicing bypassing things towards other people? Well, I said the main thing, emphasizing by talking less and listening more, okay? Be an open ear, okay? Things are always going to challenge you, especially if you already have your mind made up about something or you think you do. You're always going to feel challenged by something new. So you need to learn now to be open to new information. That way, you're able to actually grow as a human being and see where you have your flaws and whether something needs to be worked. When it comes to being a listening ear to someone or letting someone educate you through their experiences, Acknowledging is not enough, okay? I know I said in this whole segment that a lot of spiritual bypassing, there's not acknowledgement, but it doesn't end at acknowledgement. It ends at actively listening. Actively listening means that you're retaining the information and you're thinking about ways that it applies to you in your own life and ways that you can apply it actively in your active life every day. As you move forward, as you go through other experiences, how you can apply that educational information that someone's experience is giving to you. Now, the other thing that I want to say is having a positive outlook on life is not a bad thing, okay? It's okay to be positive. But when you're using positivity to drown out negativity completely, like because you just don't want to deal with negative aspects of life, that's when it becomes. And this can go both ways, because people who are overly positive sometimes don't even acknowledge that what they went through was bad. They'll say things like, oh, well, there was a blessing in disguise, or that was a blessing, but I just didn't see it. Like, no, it was a shitty experience that you learned something from, okay? You have to acknowledge it for what it is. You can't just completely paint rainbows and butterflies on your life experience and expect it to change what happened, because it's not going to, okay? So, toxic positivity in that way is harmful just as much as avoidancy in positivity, like saying that if something's not positive, then you're not going to acknowledge it. Or if an experience that you went through was negative, then you're just going to pretend it didn't happen. That is also just as bad when it comes to positivity being too much. So, I said specifically, I'm going to have to pause. I said specifically that drowning out negative experiences, whether they are from the past, current, or you're about to face them, with positivity is never okay. And it kind of turns you into a spiritual bypasser towards yourself, which you start to think is normal. So then you start to do that towards other people, and you start to drown out other people's negative experience by always seeing the positive in things, okay? It's okay to have a positive outlook. I'm going to say that again. But when you're drowning out what actually happened, or you're drowning out the reality of what went down with positivity, that's when it becomes a problem, because you become out of touch with what happened, and you're not actually working through what happened, or you're avoiding working through it in that way. So that's how you're able to recognize if what you're doing is spiritual bypassing or not. Now, to avoid being a spiritual bypasser, one thing that I also wrote down is do not invalidate yourselves or others, but at the same time, hold everyone and yourself accountable. Now, I know that sounds hard, because sometimes holding people accountable to their actions, especially if it was like an experience where there is wrongdoings on both ends, it can kind of feel like, you're invalidating them in some way, shape, or form, because you're like, what you did was wrong. Just because you also experienced something bad doesn't mean that it makes it better. But, that alone isn't in your control, okay? You are just, you're objectively looking at a situation and pointing out what it is for what it is, okay? But when, it becomes invalidating when you won't hold yourself accountable for doing shitty things. And it also becomes invalidating when you won't be a listening ear to someone, but you talk too much over them as a means to drown them out with positivity, as I was talking about. For my final tip on how to avoid being a spiritual bypasser, I said be open to criticism, or what you perceive to be criticism, and be open to also giving criticism to those who you feel are not able to look outside their own perspectives to see that they are doing something wrong, or contributing to something that is essentially harmful to a group of people, or that is harmful in the long run to themselves, okay? So criticism needs to be your best friend. I don't mean go online reading people to filth, because, they have a certain mindset that is cause them to be stuck in a certain aspect of life or a certain cycle in life. But if this is someone that that is acting this way, or who is also invalidating someone else, then definitely be open to criticizing them, but constructively, okay? We never want to attack anybody, because it just causes them to put up a wall, and it makes it harder for them to receive information. Now, yes, I get that people might put up a wall regardless, but it's easier to accept. That also being said, when someone is trying to constructively criticize you, sometimes it truly can feel like a personal attack, because you create an idea of who you are and your beliefs, and currently you might have a good idea of your belief systems, but because someone is challenging that, naturally, as a human being, you might feel threatened by it. doesn't always make you a bad person, okay? Sometimes we all feel threatened by things, end of story. That's just a human instinct that we cannot control. But just make sure that you're actively being open to it and researching things on your own and questioning your own beliefs constantly, because that's how you grow essentially as a human being, and that's how you progress into better ways of being as a person, and encouraging and actively being a what is it? Brain fog again. Actively being a good example for other people on receiving criticism instances, whether you are criticizing them or someone else is, they kind of know how to recognize that, and they see it more so as someone pointing something out versus someone coming for their throats. All right. So I'm going to end it on that note. I want to thank everyone who was attentively watching this, taking notes, whatever you were doing, or just listening for any information that you might want to utilize in your own life or grow from. And I thank all of my viewers. I thank everyone who has been continuously watching me and supporting me in every way, shape, or form, okay? And if you feel this information can be applied to someone's life or could help someone, then please share this information. You don't have to share this video specifically because not everyone's going to like me. I get that. But if I'm someone's flavor, then do it, okay? If I'm someone's cup of tea, then do it. All right, bye, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I'm not a professional, and I hope that none of you are using this video or other videos of educational topics as a means to replace professional help or therapy that you are in need of. And I ask that if you are in fact in need of that you do seek that actively, or that you find outlets to receive help of some sorts. This video is specifically for educational purposes and to spread things that need to be heard, that many people just do not want to talk about or even confront in their own lives.